Imagine a time when the world was a much different place. No smartphones, no internet, and no fast food. It was the 14th century, a time of knights, castles, and epic battles. One such battle, or rather, a grand plan that never came to be, could have changed the course of history. Picture this, the greatest king in the world, with the largest army ever assembled, planning to invade and conquer England. This wasn't just a small skirmish, it was a massive invasion, a second Norman Conquest. But why did it never happen? Let's dive into the story and explore the fascinating details. In the late 1300s, France was a powerhouse. King Charles VI, also known as Charles the Mad, was on the throne. Despite his nickname, he was supported by a powerful council, including his uncle, the Duke of Burgundy. France was at war with England, a conflict known as the 100 Years' War. The French had suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, but they were eager to turn the tide. They believed that only a decisive military victory could end the war and solidify the authority of the French Pope. The plan was audacious. The French would assemble the largest fleet ever seen, with thousands of ships and tens of thousands of soldiers. They would cross the English Channel and invade England, hoping to crush the English once and for all. It was a grand vision, but it was also a dangerous one. The French were not just planning a raid, they were planning a full-scale invasion, a true penetration that could have rewritten history. The idea of the invasion was not new. In 1385, the French had planned to send an army to Scotland to support the Scottish in their fight against the English. However, this plan was interrupted when the Flemish, led by Francis Ackermann, seized the port of Dam, where the French reinforcements were to be launched. The French, led by King Charles VI, who had just gotten married, marched north to besiege Dam. Despite the heat, the English archers, and an outbreak of plague, the French recaptured Dam after a 6-week siege, but the victory was brutal. The Burgundians, in particular, were ruthless in their punishment. Many prisoners were executed, and the city was burned and destroyed. One prisoner, before his execution, warned the king that even if he exterminated all the Flemings, their dry bones would rise up to fight him again. This harsh treatment only served to alienate the local population, and the Duke of Burgundy realized that this was not in his best interests. A peace settlement was eventually reached in December at Tournai, but the damage was done. The great age of Flemish prosperity had passed. Meanwhile, in the realm of personal lives, the nobleman Inger and de Cousy, known as the Sire de Cousy, were married at the age of 46 to a much younger wife, Isabelle, the daughter of the Duke of Lorraine. Isabelle was described as a very beautiful demoiselle, and the marriage was celebrated with great fanfare. Cousy, eager to please his young and beautiful bride, embarked on a massive renovation of his castle. He added a grand new northwest wing, complete with a magnificent banquet hall known as the Salle d'Esprit, dedicated to the 9 worthies of history. The hall was adorned with bas-reliefs of these heroes, carved so finely that it was said that if one hadn't seen them with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe such intricate work could be done in stone. The castle also saw the addition of a lady's boudoir, an indoor tennis court, a new stable, and even a water tank to supply the kitchens. Craftsmen of every kind were hired to work on the castle, from wood carvers to iron workers, and the renovation was a testament to Cousy's wealth and status. Despite the grandeur of the castle, the marriage was not very fruitful. Cousy and Isabelle had only one daughter, also named Isabelle, who later married the second son of the Duke of Burgundy. However, Cousy did have an illegitimate son named Percival, known as the Bastard of Cousy, who was acknowledged and given the seigneury of Aubermont. The year 1386 was a year of marriages, and Cousy attended the wedding of his Habsburg relative, Duke Albert III, to a daughter of Philip the Bold. This was the same year as the historic victory at Sempach, where Swiss pikemen defeated the Habsburgs. The presence of Cousy at the wedding might have been to show support for the Habsburgs, who were seeking allies. Despite the Scottish fiasco, the French were not discouraged. Instead, they were more determined than ever to invade England. The Duke of Burgundy, who was a key figure in the French court, was a strong advocate for the invasion. He told King Charles VI, "You are the greatest king living with the greatest number of subjects, and it has occurred to me many times why we do not make this passage to England to crush the great pride of these English, and make this great enterprise one of eternal memory." The French believed that the time was right for the invasion. England was in great discord, and the nobility was not united in support of the king. The Duke of Lancaster, a powerful English noble, had left England with a large force to conquer the throne of Castile, leaving England vulnerable. The French, who had intelligence from French and English fishermen, saw this as their opportunity. The invasion fleet was to be the greatest ever assembled. Chroniclers wrote of 40,000 knights and squires, 50,000 horses, and 60,000 foot soldiers. The numbers were meant to be impressive, and the preparations were on a massive scale. Money was the first priority, and a sales tax of 5% plus 25% on beverages was levied throughout the kingdom. This tax was renewed repeatedly, but it never brought in enough money. Ships were hired or purchased from all over Europe, and French shipyards worked day and night. The fleet was assembled in the mouth of the Scheldt, and the sight was described as the greatest of its kind ever seen. The ships were decorated with gilded prows, silvered masts, and sails striped with cloth of gold and silk. Admiral de Vienne's flagship was painted red and adorned with his arms, while Philip of Burgundy's ship was black and decorated with the coats of arms of all his possessions. Even Coucy's ship, one of the most sumptuous in the fleet, was seized in a daring raid up the Seine by a Portuguese admiral allied with the Duke of Lancaster. The preparations for the invasion were extensive. Day after day, supplies poured in barrels for biscuit, timber for carts, portable hand mills for grinding wheat, cannonballs, ropes, candles, lanterns, mattresses, and straw pallets. The Duke of Burgundy ordered 101 beef cattle, 447 sheep, 224 hams, 500 fat hens, capons, and geese, along with spices, almonds, sugar, rice, oil, and cheese. The weapons and armor included swords, lances, halberds, suits of armor, helmets, shields, banners, pennants, arrows, gunpowder, and cannonballs. One of the most ambitious parts of the plan was the construction of a portable wooden town to protect and house the invaders upon landing. This town was to be an artificial Calais, with a circumference of 9 miles and an area of 1,000 acres. It was to be surrounded by a wooden wall 20 feet high, reinforced by towers. The town was prefabricated in Normandy by 5,000 woodcutters and carpenters, and was designed to be assembled in just 3 hours. It was a testament to the technological capabilities of the 14th century, but it was also a reflection of the overambitious and unrealistic nature of the plan. The port of Sluys, where the king stayed, was overflowing with nobles, functionaries, craftsmen, and servants. The Red Count of Savoy, Amadeus VII, entertained everyone, and the poet Eustache Deschamps wrote confidently, "Yours will be the land of England, where once there was a Norman Conquest, valiant heart will make war once more." However, despite all the preparations, the invasion never happened. The French nobles were impatient, and the mass of men gathered in the area grew restless and disorderly. Many could not be paid, and the cost of living was rising. The local Flemish were sullen and quarrelsome, remembering the brutal punishment they had suffered after the Battle of Russebec. They asked, "Why the devil does not the King of France pass over into England? Are we not in poverty enough?" The invasion was delayed for various reasons, including the late arrival of the Duc de Berry, who was a key figure in the plan. The delays, combined with the growing unrest and financial strain, eventually led to the abandonment of the invasion. The grand plan that could have changed the course of history was never realized. The failure of the invasion was a turning point. The French, who had been so confident, began to lose their grip on the war. The 100 Years' War would continue for many more years, and the French would face more defeats. The grand vision of a second Norman conquest remained just that, a vision, a dream that never came to be. In the end, the 14th century was a time of great ambition and great folly. The French, driven by a sense of grandeur and a desire to crush their enemies, planned an invasion that was as impressive as it was impractical. The story of the planned invasion of England is a reminder that sometimes, no matter how grand the vision, the reality can be very different. It is a lesson in the limits of human ambition and the unpredictable nature of history.